Hello, everyone, and welcome to our community session of Claris Engage Beyond today, the value and benefits of transactions with Vince Menanno from Beezwax. Before we get started, I just have a few WebEx tips and housekeeping notes for you. First, we've dropped the WebEx support numbers into the chat, and they should be on screen. Vince, if you can go to the next slide, please. And you have control over your WebEx experience. In the upper right of the screen, you can choose how you want to display the presentation today, including disabling presenters who are off camera. And you can use the Q&A under the three dots in the lower left to ask questions during today's session. If you send them to all panelists, I will ask Vince as many questions as we have time for at the end of today's session. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Vince Menanno, again from Beezwax, as our featured speaker from the Claris community today. Take it away, Vince.
Thank you, Rosemary, and thank you for, it's an honor to be able to speak at the Claris Engage conference this year again. So I'm very grateful. So I have a very great session that I'm looking forward to sharing with you all. And so my name is Vincenzo Menanno. I'm with Beezwax, and I am the Director of FileMaker Development at Beezwax. However, Beezwax has grown so much since I started almost 2 decades ago. It's such a large team, and I am extremely grateful for all the talented people that participate and share their knowledge with me, so that I'm standing on the shoulders of some great people as part of this presentation as well. So some things about me: I love hiking, I like biking, traveling, architecture, precision engineering, sharp knives, and parking backwards. As many of you may have heard me speak in the past, I'm a real, I love parking backwards. And I'm in a place in Germany where people do park backwards a lot. So it's fascinating to me, at the mindset of parking backwards. So I'm also the father of 2 wonderful kids that keep me very busy in life, and I have just become officially a teenage dad. So my son just turned 13 a few weeks ago, and so I'm looking forward to that journey as well. So the agenda today is we're gonna kind of do a quick review of what native transactions are in FileMaker, and then we're going to talk about how you can control transactions and build your own transactions. So just to do a quick recap there. And we're going to talk about the benefits you can get by using transactions to move from unstored to stored. So you can look at that. We'll look at some innovative and creative ways that you can use indirect data entry versus direct data entry. And I call FileMaker data entry direct data entry. So then we're going to look at some free stuff, and what you get natively out of FileMaker, and how you can measure performance so that you know you're making improvements. And we'll look at the release debug file and a log, and then some transactional considerations, a quick example of how to set up a baseline, and then again we'll look at some of the changes that we did in terms of how to capture data using a local file versus global technique. And then we'll talk about levels of difficulty using transactions. And then we'll do some demos, and then we'll do a quick recap. So let's dive in. Response times, the 3 important limits. There are 3 main time limits which are determined by human perceptual abilities to keep in mind when optimizing web and application performance. This is from the Nielsen-Norman group. And so basically 1/10 of a second, your app is reacting instantaneously. 1 second, the user's flow of thought can stay uninterrupted, and then 10 seconds or more, you're going to lose the attention of the user. So bear in mind those limits when you look at some of these numbers that I'm going to present, and as well think about them in your application development as well. So native behavior in FileMaker, as just a recap, again, if you locking related records also implicitly locks the parent record. All changes are part of a single transaction. This is native behavior in FileMaker. So in this screenshot I have here, the row at the top is the body part, like the record itself, and at the bottom is a portal. And so when the user clicks into an entry in the bottom in the portal and makes a change there, the user will lock that record and implicitly lock the parent record as well. And so the user can make additional changes to other records unless they are already locked by someone else. But anyway, nonetheless, they can make some additional changes. And then they can also, because they've already locked the parent record, they can also make a change to the parent record. Now, if they commit at this point by clicking outside or hit enter or run a script that uses the commit step, then all those changes are kind of rolled together as one transaction. And so that's very important to understand for some new people who don't know about this, but also to kind of solidify that in your understanding. So as a developer, you can also roll your own, which is, I have an example here of 5 tables, and we have a transaction table with one field, just an ID record field, and then we have a project table, a task table, an audit table, and an audit field table. And what we can do is we can gain control by flipping around the keys and edit or create any related records through these relationships. So you have to allow the creation of related records through the relationship, and then you can either create data or edit data. And the key important point to remember here is that as long as the transaction record is not committed in this process, then everything that you do through these relationships at the time that you commit is all packaged together as one transaction. And that's very, very powerful. And we're going to see an example of that soon. But just looking at a comparison of native versus transactional behavior in terms of like the procedural behavior that we have natively in FileMaker, something that is not transactional, let's say, is that, let's say we move from, our scripting. So we go to a particular layout, we'll create a record, we'll set some fields on that record and then commit it. We'll go to another layout and then, do the same steps and commit the record. So the same process over and over. So very procedural. Users love this because they easily understand how the application works, and it's very procedural. So that's native behavior in FileMaker. However, like I showed before, you can control this using transactions, and basically something similar, except transactionally stated. You would create the transaction record, you would set a key that maps you or points you to a record in one of those related tables, and then you would set those fields on that related record, either create the data or edit the data, and you then just move through the process by changing the key and pointing to another record and setting fields, etc., until you're done and you've done all your changes and you haven't hit an issue or anything like that where a record has been locked by someone else. And then you simply commit, and all those changes would be transacted. Again, for simplicity, I haven't added any code here to trap for errors and record locks, etc. I'm just trying to get the point across in terms of the difference between the native behavior and how you can roll your own transactional behavior. So I want to come across on another point here, which is very important, which is the whole reason you would want to do this is so that you have the ability transactionally to then store data. And this is a very important point because here I have a list view of data, And the three columns on the right, those three columns are unstored calculations. And so they count the related sales in the related sales table. And then there's another one that is a sum of sales in the other table. And then the remaining is just an unstored calc because it depends on a previously unstored calc. So it then becomes an unstored calc. So very simple relationship. However, you can use transactions to convert unstored calculations to stored calculations and speed up WAN performance. And this is going to be more relevant here in the next slides. So I have in my list view 792 sales goals records with related data. The time to draw those records over a WAN connection, and this is my network connection here. And I will add this, that we came to Germany about a year ago to help out with family, and we've been living here in Germany. And don't ask me to speak German because my German is very bad. My kids speak German really, really well, but I'm really slow to catch on to German. I can speak a few words and I'm doing pretty well. So, just to get this data and to see this data, if you have no summary fields in the mix here, and you're looking at the unstored, view versus the stored view, you're talking 26 seconds versus almost 2 seconds. So just to, go to a layout that has 792 records in the list view and see that data, get drawn for let's say about 80 records in my list view. That's a huge difference. That's a huge difference. So if we then look at, the impact that maybe if you want to look at all those 792 records and you want to get an aggregated total of the totals across all of them, and you use a summary field at the top in your header or something like that, now you're going to see huge difference in performance. Even with the summary field, in the case of the stored records, you're still going to just see a smaller hit on performance, but it's nothing compared to the amount of time it takes to render that with the unstored values. So if we look at this other example of using native versus transactions and what benefits we have there. So in this example, I'm going to create a project record, 3 task records. I'm going to create 4 audit table records, 20 audit field records, and then I'm going to be touching about 118 fields. If I do this over a LAN or a WAN, a local area, like locally on my computer using FileMaker, or on a LAN connected to a server in my local area network, or run it PSOS, all those using it transactionally, you're going to see a slight benefit by doing it. So like, again, the native approach by going, which is not transactional, which is basically go from one layout, create data, go to another layout, create data, et cetera, et cetera. So one script to cover all those data points. If we move this to a WAN, we see a huge increase in performance over a WAN. And you'll notice that even though we're doing it transactionally over a WAN, it's still 15.3 seconds. So yes, it is faster, but you're not getting the benefits of using transactions from a performance point of view, because there's a lot of chattiness between the client and the server. The best option is to roll up everything, all your data that you're transacting, and send it to the server and run it PSOS. So it runs 99% faster using PSOS. And this is using an Intel machine. And I was fortunate enough last year, I bought one of those new MacBook Pro M1s, and on M1 it's 35% faster. So I'm really amazed with those machines, and I can't wait to get one of the newer ones that came out recently. So caching, let's talk about caching really quickly. So what you get out of the box with FileMaker is that when you open a file the first time, FileMaker does a lot of work to cache a number of different things. Like the theme, the layout, the records, the scripts, et cetera, et cetera. It's amazing how much better it's gotten over time. And so the first time you open a file, and this is a production file, and I've opened it, let's say from Germany. Again, I've been in Germany for the last year. And so I've had firsthand experience to have to deal with, the speed issues at this distance. And it really opened up my eyes on how we can, improve things. And so, the bytes received is huge. The first time you're getting all that data transferred over, and then every subsequent time that you open the file within a 2-week period, you go in the next day, you go in the next day, it's a fraction of the time to get logged in and use the solution. So it's 90% faster. It's huge savings in network traffic, and it's a lot fewer calls to and from the server. So you're getting all of this for free by just staying current with the current release of FileMaker. So that's really great. Something that I've often asked for and always, wanting to do is measure. And so, the adage, measure twice, cut once. So I'm really happy that they have this new capability now in 19.1 or later, that you have this thing called release debug flags. And so basically what you do is you can create a plain text file called release debug on.txt and save it at the root level of your application directory with these flags, and then restart FileMaker Pro, again 19.1 or greater. And then what you'll see is every time you open up a solution and you're opening up a solution that is on server, you'll see the calls that are being sent from the client into the server back and forth. So you'll see that communication, and then there's details in these log entries that allow you to aggregate these items together so that you can look at a total summary of things like this. So for example, this is a small test file that we've been using to read that data and see, like, for example, hey, I want to see the difference between unstored versus stored, and using summary fields or not using summary fields. And so I can see right away the impact in terms of not only time, but bytes sent, bytes received, and the number of calls. So this is a test file that reads that log and then encapsulates it and flattens it, and then aggregates these totals. We'll put together a blog post on this, and we will release an example file that you can leverage this as well. So I'm a big believer in measuring. So every time I tell my team, I say, if we're going to make a change, let's measure before, let's measure after, so that we have quantifiable evidence that says, hey, we made it this much better. So establish a baseline. One great way to establish a baseline to show your customers that, if you're going to use transactions and move from unstored to stored, what you can do as a quick example of the actual results that you can deliver for the customer is a perfect example is to use a list view with unstored calculations in that list view. So export the data from all those fields that are present in that list view, including the unstored calculations. Import that data into a new file, host it on a server, then start a test from a blank layout using the release debug, and then show that list of records, the same number of records in both cases, and then compare the output in the debug.log and compare those two outputs. You'll be amazed, especially over a WAN. Again, the performance on a LAN is very good, but over a WAN, it's really you need to pay a lot of attention to details. So I'm going to move over to talk about the levels of difficulty when working with transactions. And basically, you have to know the rules and know when and how to break them. So what I just showed before in a little slide, in a little example there about the relationship of, going through that relationship and creating or editing data. It's very easy to follow. And so creating, editing, and deleting data through transactions is really easy. The difficult side is managing locks, auditing, and moving to stored values. So it's not the intent to cover that in this presentation, but I really want to let you know that we don't have time to cover it right now, but that's the difficult side. But if you can achieve that, your solutions are going to run so much faster. So now we're going to look at some demos real quick. And so my first demo here shows an example of 3 tables: the transaction table, a parent table, and a child table. The transaction table has only one field in it, has an ID field. And so look at the relationships, and you'll notice here I have the ability to, I don't have the ability to create related records in this case. So I'm just editing the data. So basically through the relationship, I'm editing the records, but you could also set that option turned on so that you can create related data. So, but this example is just editing those records. In the comments above, you'll see also that I have a text, a line, and a graphic. And those are easy to add to your graph. It's just a text table occurrence note. And you'll see that you can also add emojis into your note, and they render perfectly fine. So you can spruce up your graph really nicely with descriptions and one of the things that Mike Harris talked about in FileMaker 7 came out is table occurrence groups. And so you can create sections and make them really look nice. So anyway, getting back to the example here. So I'm going to run a script in Debugger here and step through the script. And this script, what this script will do, first thing it'll do is it's going to create a transaction record. And so I have my transaction record, and the important thing to remember here is that I don't commit that record. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the script very procedurally. I'm going to have keys that I'm going to set in those 2 different portals to reach over and edit or delete records through that relationship. Now, I could have used UUIDs, and those would have been pointing directly to a unique record in each case. I chose to use numeric IDs for simplicity of understanding this example. So if I go through and I set a key, and then I go ahead and step through and delete that portal record, you'll see the records start to disappear in the table in the window on the right. So I've deleted all the colors for Fiorella. And now I'm going to delete the record for Fiorella. So now I only have 1 record left in the, so I still have 2, but I'm going to now delete that 1 record. And now that record is gone. I only have now 5 records left, 4, 3, 2, 1, and all the colors are gone. And now I have 1 record left in the parent table. And now that record is also gone. And so the important point here is, like, I've just deleted all my related records through this controlled transaction table occurrence and table that I've acted on through those relationships. And now the important step here that I'm going to step into is revert, and you'll see all those records magically come back. And that is really, whenever I show this to people, that's like magic. And so you have control to build these kinds of transactions in your scripting. Let's look at another demo or talk about this other thing that I want to cover. And that is, just again, recapping, user A is modifying a record, and the server's got a lock on that record. Now, user B can't modify it until user A has committed it, and then that record is updated also for user B. So when we first went down this road, what we wanted to do is like, hey, can't we just, load this data into like a popover, and the lines in black are like global fields. So we load the data from the record into these global fields. And then when we want to make a change, we have a save and cancel button, and then we send that to the server, and all is good. However, the problem is that if you have two records in two different windows, those global fields are going to crosstalk, and you're going to have some data from record 2 show up on record 1, and so that's a bad thing. And so that was our kind of our first iteration. And what we discovered is, okay, that's good if you only have a single window interface. But if you have multiple windows and you want to support this, this took us down this other path of what I call local file editing. And what we do is, on opening the hosted file, we deploy what is called a local file. And then that local file has got a variable file reference back into the hosted file, and then those table occurrences show up in the hosted file. We install a card window based on a table occurrence in the local file. And so now in this case, we have those two records from before, and they're totally safe. I have one card window that I'm editing records with record data for, and I have a unique record in the local file that corresponds to that. So I don't have this crosstalk anymore. We've solved that issue with this. And the other beauty of this technique is that there's no traffic going to and from the server. Everything is happening locally. It's absolutely beautiful. I love this technique. And and so we package up the data, we do the same thing, we send it to the server, and we transact it. So one of the things that comes up often and people ask about this technique is, what about, locks? So one way to address locks, I'm not going to get into too much detail about this, but is that you can build hashes. And so you have 3 hashes you can build. The current state is what's on the server. The future state is what the new edited values are, and the past state is what you started the value with when you started editing. And so you can compare those in different ways and then determine whether or not you want to give a message to the user saying, hey, someone else has changed this record. Do you want to still submit your changes, or do you want to review what the other person submitted? And this also gives you the granularity of building hashes of components or subsets of your fields. And with that, then you can do a hash of 2 fields or 3 fields, and that's better than using record modification count, because record modification count is like a wholesale thing every time a record gets changed. But you might want to only change some fields, and someone else might change some other fields. So it doesn't matter that you're both gonna go and edit that record. Okay. Let's go to the next example. And in this example is really showcasing, the local file. And so the 2 tables, the 2 windows on the right are the local file, and we're looking at layouts in that local file. And you can see here, there's my variable file reference that I established to the local file that got deployed. And so I've opened up those the local file so you can see the data as I work on it. So what I just did is I created a card window. In this card window, it automatically created a project record in the top right corner of the window there. And now I just created 3 task records. And the important thing to remember here is that all this time, all those records I just created, no traffic was sent to the server whatsoever. And I can interact with this. I can click out of the fields. I can have unstored calculations. I can have all kinds of summary fields. There's no cost at all to the user for, you could create hundreds of records if you wanted to. It's all local anyway. And so you're seeing the data that I'm entering there for the task, and you're seeing it kind of real time as I put in data here for those fields, and modifying those records. And then at some point, when I'm done, what we're going to do is we're going to click that green button. And what that green button will do is it'll package up all this data that's in this local file, and it will send it to the server to transact on it. And that's going to be done in a fraction of a second, and the user basically gets the record created, and it shows up in their view down here at the bottom. And so, yeah, that's the demos that I have. Just a quick recap. So we looked at a refresher on transactions, native versus rolling your own, manipulating data over a WAN for better performance. Again, this technique is you can strive to store data using transactions to help you do that. And so that's like that's the nirvana. If you can just have stored data when you deliver, lists and data that's stored in general, then the client doesn't have to do all this extra work to pull down that related data every time you're looking at a list view or a record with related data. So, it's really based on the design that you come up with. We talked about this unique and interesting way that you can use the local file to do indirect data manipulation versus what I call direct data manipulation, which is, you click inside a field in a record in FileMaker and you lock that record. And the other benefit is that, there's extra work the server has to do to keep track of these locks, etc. And, you're starting a project record, you create these task records. So there's all this extra work the server's doing. If you use the indirect data manipulation technique by deploying a local file, all that extra work for server is gone. It's all happening locally. And of course, you can do all the validation you want and send it to the server when you're ready. We talked about globals versus local file for data manipulation. And the key important point I want to stress here for all of us, our peers and people in the community is that, you really got to know the rules and know how and when to break them. So again, establish a baseline and use the release debug flags to analyze the output and so that you can see that you're making improvements. Again, there's an easy side and a difficult side to this. And so understanding that is really important. And yeah, so I'm done with my my slides and my talk. These are different ways that you can reach out to me and send me an email or follow up with me if you like. I've looked at a number of different resources online. And again, there's some great resources that Todd Geist put out for transactions for many, many years now, that he's been an advocate for that for a long time. There's some great blog posts by him. There's a blog post by Soliant about the release debug flags, and other really great people in the community like Mark Richmond and Chris Irvine, and they've done some great talks on this topic as well. So I encourage you to go and check those out. And that's it for me. And I am standing by for questions and answers.
All right, great job, Vince. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
you're welcome.
The first question that came in is a review of what were the exact release debug flags that you said to use. I don't know if you can get that slide back up. If not, we can post it in the Claris community.
Probably get that flag. Yeah, I can get that flag back up pretty quick here. Where is it? There. You see it?
No, you're not sharing at this point.
Oh, okay. I'm not sharing at this point. Oh, something happened in my share. Okay, sorry about that. There you go. Do you see it now?
Yes, I see it now.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. I'll move back to the last slide.
Yeah, so just that, I'm just going to type an answer here. It was, what was the second flag? It was force output.
Force output and, oh my God, I can't remember.
Oh my, I can't even type.
Where is it? Here. Oh no, it's not here. Where is it? Here. It's force output and remote calls. And
right.
Again, in the comments in the blog post, there's a great blog post by Soliant on this topic as well. So I encourage you to go look at that.
All right. And then a couple of questions is, are you going to release a demo file? And specifically a demo of the local file editing approach?
Yeah, I can. We've been using that internally for testing and doing various things. I can definitely release an example file of that in the future for sure. Yes, along with the file that aggregates the totals for that's on the plan as well too. That reads the debug.log file as well. So that's on the plan to release as well.
Yeah, and a second question about the local file option. Does this work with FileMaker Cloud and Claris ID?
We haven't tested that with FileMaker Cloud. It would probably work. In cloud for sure. It's just deploying a local file, and so that would work if you had it on cloud. But we haven't done any work with WebDirect. Sorry, I'm confusing the two. So it should work with cloud, no problem.
Very good. And I'm just scrolling through quickly. And here's a question from Hansa. It's good to point out that replacing unstored calculations with stored is not a universal solve for performance problems. Important to understand that record size can impact operations, and to make, and again, as you said, Vince, you need to experiment and make the right decision on when to store and when to leave data unstored.
Yeah, and it's a complicated topic. That's why I put it in the difficult side. And so it's really an exercise for the listener to explore and see how much they can do, and it doesn't apply to every situation. And solution complexity factors in a number of different things factor in. And Hansa, by the way, has a great, he's doing a lot in terms of researching performance and doing things like that. So he's got a lot of insight in that field as well too. So.
All right, and I'm just going to give everybody 30 more seconds to pop in questions. But that is all we have. And so, Vince, I do want to say thank you again for being our last speaker. Oh, one more question popped in.
Oh.
And then can you discuss kind of an approach, or how you would approach converting unstored calculations to stored? And how do you get the system to perform updates once you've made that change?
Yeah. So, the first thing I would do, like I said, establish that baseline. So, if you have situations that are slow, etc., if you were to just render the same data as stored data, then you could see the difference in performance. So that's the first thing I always do, and that is I want to see what my baseline can be with this data, and then to look at solutions and how the data needs to be transacted to get the data results you need is a complicated topic. But I will say again, this idea of you can strive for data, transactional integrity versus eventual integrity. So you could do things where it really doesn't matter that the records in one table don't have the exact results at the time that you submit the transaction. That's eventual integrity. And you can do that simply by having a timestamp and updating that timestamp as a trigger to trigger your calculations to recalculate in a table. And then all those are stored values. That can be heavy-handed, but that is a viable approach in most cases. And that's one way to do it. And so that's I guess I'll stop there, because the other thing is a much more elaborate discussion, and for another day.
All right. Well, thanks so much. So again, Vince, thank you for contributing and speaking at Claris Engage Beyond 2021. And if you can go to our What's Next slide,
Yes, can I say one last thing? I want to also thank my team because it's really a great honor to work with them, and I thank them because all the great stuff that we do is a lot in part to them. So thank you again.
Thank you. And also I want to thank everybody who presented and contributed to Claris Engage Beyond 2021. We made it a great event, or a great series of events over the last several months. And coming next, we'll be recognizing and celebrating the global Claris community and all the great work that you do with the celebration of the Claris Excellence Awards. And this year, instead of a single session webinar announcing the award winners, we'll feature everybody who won awards this year in an ongoing campaign that will launch starting in December. We appreciate your expertise and generosity and are grateful for all you continue to do for the Claris community, and for each other. So stay tuned to the claris.com Engage page for more information and the announcement of the winners coming soon. And while Claris Engage Beyond 2021 has been great, we know how important it is to everybody in this community to gather in person. And so now we are actively planning Claris Engage 2022 live from Nashville. So please save the dates in July on your calendar and plan to join us at the Gaylord Opryland Resort and Convention Center next year. So with that, thank you everyone for coming, and please take a few minutes to fill out the survey for this session. I've just dropped the link into the chat, and Vince, if you can go to the next slide to pull it up on screen. We use your feedback to both let us know how we're doing in the moment with these sessions and also to plan forward. So please let us know what you thought about today's session and what you'd like to see featured at Claris Engage in Nashville next July. So again, I want to thank Vince, thank all our speakers, and thank everybody who attended today's session or any of the other Claris Engage sessions we've had this year. And we will see you again soon.